Hey everyone, welcome again to More Layers. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith, and welcome to our first episode in March of 2023.
Yep, and we are currently, I believe, 3 weeks away from our Artists Unlimited reunion, which is when they'll formally announce the next show. Well, I don't think for a while after that we'll be able to tell you about it, but maybe when it gets closer or maybe afterwards, we'll maybe tell you about it.
Well, when we did our production of Shrek, when they first announced it to us, they did ask that we didn't say anything because there were a couple things, maybe the rights that they still technically needed to acquire. Uh, but in most other cases, we can usually let everybody know the day of. It really just depends. But yeah, we finally got the announcement. The cast is going to meet on Sunday, the 26th. And by the end of that reunion, we're finally going to know what we're doing this year.
Yeah, something I'm looking forward to.
As am I, and quite frankly, so many other people, both in and outside of the cast.
Yeah. All right. So, and today we're looking at what is probably one of the more controversial stories currently in development in the news, the Alec Baldwin shooting case. Yeah. And so, little background to kind of set you up. So, supposedly, while shooting the movie Rust, Baldwin mistakenly fired a gun being used as a prop, killing a crew member and injuring another. The family of the killed person sued Baldwin, and he was later charged with involuntary manslaughter. There's a good chance Baldwin could face a year and a half of confinement when all is said and done.
Yeah, that's the gist of the scenario. And I will say right off the bat that he isn't my favorite person out there. He's done some stuff that I'm not particularly fond of. That being said, while I think some of the blame should be on him, I don't think all of it should. I think part of the responsibility should be on him considering he had the gun. He, for some reason, was pointing it at somebody and had his finger on the trigger. But I think part of the responsibility should be on the people who are in charge of props. Because if that gun was being used as a prop or was only supposed to fire blanks, they should, like the people in charge of the props, they should make absolutely sure that this gun is not loaded with actual bullets or any sort of projectile. Um, in Baldwin's case, he made he obviously made a big mistake. He accidentally killed someone. At the same time, though, one of the most common, I don't know if it's written anywhere, but one of the most common unwritten rules when it comes to guns is that no matter what you think, you always want to act like the weapon is loaded. Because if something like this were to happen, like if you think the gun is not loaded and then it is, and then this happens, it's something that could have easily been prevented. But because he didn't follow this rule, and because neither he nor the people in charge of the props were careful enough, a tragedy took place that could have easily been avoided if they were just careful.
Our executive pastor at our church, not that long ago, bought his very first gun to protect his family, and he has talked on stage about the rules they teach you about firearm safety. One being, like you said, anytime you touch the weapon, treat it like it's loaded.
Yep.
Also, one other key rule: don't ever point it at anything that you don't want struck or killed or destroyed.
Yep.
Right.
Which is why I always find it's extremely risky when doing a shootout scene or like a good example. I forget which Indiana Jones movie this is. It's an extremely funny scene where he's having a standoff with a guy who has a sword, but then he just pulls out his gun and shoots him. Now, while that scene is extremely funny, part of me wonders how people on the receiving end of a movie gunshot where it's not actually something being fired at them, I just wonder how a lot of them don't flinch. Because if a gun, even if it's just a prop, is pointed at them, I would be so tempted to jump out of the way because I don't know if that thing has actual bullets in it or not, even if they say it doesn't.
Yeah, I can't say for sure how careful they were, like checking it or whatever, but considering Steven Spielberg was behind the scenes of this project, and considering I haven't seen anything too negative in his track record, I would like to think, based on that they checked it thoroughly beforehand.
Oh, I'm sure they did. I'm just more thinking like how the actors, even if they're told that there's no actual projectiles in the gun, how some of them don't start to trying to think of the right phrasing, like flinch or kind of back away a little bit or something. It was like in most circumstances, I would never want a gun pointed at me.
Fair? Yeah.
But yeah, I did hear not too long ago in Baldwin's case that I think some of his charges were dropped, but not all of them.
There was one drop charge, I think, that the district attorney dropped of what was it? Gun enhancement charge. It's in the link I've got up here.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing was definitely charged. It sounds like you were saying he'll still be charged with involuntary manslaughter. Um, and of course, I don't think he did it on purpose, hence the term involuntary. Because I also remember a clip that surfaced when he was sitting in a room after this all went down, and somebody, I forget who it was, sat down and told him that the person he shot didn't make it. If I remember right, because it's been a while since I've seen it, he kind of fell apart a little bit. And it's like I wouldn't blame him because I wouldn't have wanted to do that on purpose either. And considering I made a I would have made a mistake that ends up costing somebody their life, I would react the same way.
Well, now that you mention that, that does kind of make me feel a little bit better about him, and make it kind of easier for me to trust him because, while I would want to give him the benefit of the doubt, I don't want to just assume I know the whole story, but
Right.
I know there have been infamous cases uh, uh, that have been so big they've appeared in the news of Baldwin behaving rather hurtful and narcissistic in the past, like the voicemail he left for his daughter, the Words with Friends incident, and I don't think we need to go into detail about those things, but they have just those things have given me the vibe that he is full of himself, but maybe there is at least a good bone in his body that either was hidden for so long or has developed since then. You know, you telling me what you just told me, I feel a little more like I can easily trust him.
Yeah, if you remember me later, I'll send you the clip after we're done here. Um, but yeah, like I said earlier, he's not my favorite person out there, favorite celebrity by any means, but he's still human. And clips like that show that, like you were saying, there's still some good in him. That sounds cliche, corny, something you'd hear out of a movie, but there are some highlights in there. You just gotta dig a little bit to find them.
Yeah. If someone were really a narcissist, I don't even think they would even react that sort of way that he did for a second. So maybe, I think maybe I drew the wrong conclusion in the past about him, or maybe, maybe I just didn't. There was something in him I didn't see, or I don't know.
Maybe, and like you were saying, we don't know the whole story, and since we've never met him personally, it's hard to say that we know much about him outside of what we see in social media. So, like, there could be an entirely separate side to him that we just don't know about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there may be still some confidence that he has betrayed some relationships that have never been the same because of his hurtful actions in the past, but maybe some things he might need to work on. But um, you know, we just have to uh, well, make sure we know the facts before we go to a conclusion. And even if he has done something malicious or horribly narcissistic, I feel like it is too exasperating for us to go about our days grumbling or ranting or complaining well, or growling about it all the time. It's better for us. uh, uh, Not that we let it slide, but it's better for us, really. Saves us unnecessary stress if we let it go.
Well, yeah, we don't necessarily have to completely forget about it, but at the same time, uh, if we forgive each other, support each other where we can, instead of just constantly being angry at somebody, we would definitely be in a much better place.
I think so too. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's probably enough of that. Why don't we move on to a little higher note and talk about a little curious question of the day? And in this case, who are some non-lead characters, supporting and or recurring, that might be good subjects for spin-off shows or films? And I'll let Jordan start.
Sure. I came up with, let's see if I can cut them off here. I think eight.
Oh,
Uh,
good.
and the first I thought of was Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, I'm fully aware that there's a Disney Plus show that kind of covers some of his story between episodes 3 and 4, but I was thinking more of a prequel type of thing, like a much younger version of him where he's fully becoming a Jedi Knight, where he first meets Qui-Gon, his master. So kind of a prequel to the prequel films, or maybe something that could explain more of what happened between each prequel film in general. Because, like, for example, with Anakin, between the first and second film, he goes from this small boy to this suddenly really tall adult. And through this Disney Plus show, we kind of get a snippet here and there of how things were when he was training Anakin or somebody. But I would love to see an even younger version of him, because we've seen him as an older warrior in the original trilogy. We've seen him kind of as a Padawan in the first film and then a master entirely in the second and third. So maybe when he was training as a youngling, or like I was saying, right around the time he first meets his master Qui Gon, something like that.
And you talking about that sort of time gap between episodes 1 and 2, it kind of reminds me of something Mark Lowry said in one of his famous monologues. When you read the Gospels, There's like a whole 18-year gap of time, like between him at age 12 and then starting his ministry at 30. Well, we don't know anything in between, which
That is true.
would have been kind of cool if we could have, but
Well, I'm
it
sure
is.
one day when we go to meet him, we can learn about some of it.
Oh, sure, yeah. But either way, it would probably make sense to maybe do something, some kind of story, some kind of a prequel upon prequel covering Obi-Wan's beginnings or life before the whole Jedi thing began with him.
Sure.
He is it would be kind of give us an explanation of how he became the cool, wise mentor figure, natural leader type Jedi that we all know him as.
Yeah, sure. I personally would love to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that'd be a good example.
Yeah. For my next one, I thought of Dr. Robotnik or Eggman, and as he's commonly known, specifically from the movies. And I'm going to go into a little bit of a spoiler area here, but the reason I thought of him was because by the end of the first Sonic film, he gets sent to a planet that is overrun by many and a lot of them giant mushrooms. And then by the end of the opening scene in the second one, he's escaping. So I feel like it would be cool to see, even if it's just like a mini series, a show that kind of covers his time on that planet between when he got there and before he left. Because there were some things that were kind of covered in a montage of sorts. And then by the end of that opening scene, he runs into these creatures with weapons, neither of which are really explained much. But I feel like maybe this miniseries could cover his experience while he was there, how he developed some of the stuff that he did in between, and who these other characters were. So yeah, even if it's a miniseries, it could be a sort of a documentary where he kind of self narrates everything that happens, something along that line. But I feel like it'd be fun to watch.
All right.
So for my third one, I thought of Syndrome from The Incredibles. And I thought of him because we see him at the beginning of the film. And then the next time we see him after the cops take him away, he's an adult and he's on the verge of killing off Mr. Incredible. Um, and then we see in a brief flashback when Syndrome explains what happened that he's angrily looking at a poster of Mr. Incredible right before he rips it off the wall. But we don't see much else. So I would have loved to see a spin-off of sorts that kind of shows his descent into villainy. Because we see him good and then we see him evil, but we don't see much of the transition in the middle. We understand
Right,
why.
right.
Yeah, we don't understand why, but we don't really see it. So I figure it'd be cool to see a series that shows that transition and how he got all these inventions, how he got an entire base, an entire island, and full of minions to follow him, and maybe kind of go into how he defeated all these other supers before he got to Mr. Incredible. Because there's also a scene in the movie, for
Right.
those that might not be aware, where Mr. Incredible is looking at this computer that shows that all these other heroes have been eliminated. So it's like, what if we saw some of that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. In The Incredibles, yes. Indeed, we do see we have in a way we have an explanation of what triggers his switch over to the dark side in a way, but we don't really see the journey there necessarily.
Right.
And it's never really explained, like you said, how he got his little island domain, or how he got his hands on all this technology, or or even I think the woman Mirage was like his girlfriend or something. We don't know how that came along.
Girlfriend, secretary, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, and so yeah, doing a new screen project maybe focused on him would probably do a really good job of filling in all those blanks.
I certainly would think so.
Yeah.
Uh, whether or not they'll do that, I don't know because it took them 14 years to make a sequel. But yeah, we'll see. Uh, Next on my list is Kitty Softpaws from the Puss in Boots films. She's kind of like an equal to Puss in Boots in a way, kind of slash love interest rival, and we don't see much of her outside of when she's with Puss. Um, but I would love to see how she got to be as good as she is, where she can swipe something off of somebody and they won't even realize it right away. Um, and it's established in the second film, again, spoilers, that these two do kind of have some sort of romantic connection. Uh, but we don't really see that develop too much. So that, like a spin-off, could help with that. Um, I think it would just be cool to see her go on some of her own solo adventures.
Yeah, kind of like the Spider Gwen thing, I guess.
In a way, yeah. A lot like that, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
So for my fifth entry, I thought of the character Wesley from The Princess Bride. And fun fact, this is one of my favorite movies, especially when it comes to movies that I like to quote. Because if anyone
Uh,
who's seen that movie, especially multiple times, can recite many of the lines from that movie easily,
right.
many of which come from him. Anyway, um, the reason I thought of him is because we see an opening scene where he and Buttercup, excuse me, Buttercup have some interactions off of each other, and then at one point he kind of just walks away, going on his own little journey. And the next time we see him, he's disguised as a pirate. And then he eventually reveals himself to her and they restore their relationship. And he kind of goes into a little detail of where he was and what he was doing. But I would love to see him being the Dread Pirate Roberts, as he's called, through some of the film and what he did while on this journey before they reunited. Many of these characters I noticed that I have on this list are kind of ones that I thought, what happens in between event A and event B? And this is certainly no different because, like I said, he goes on this journey and then we don't see him for a long time. So it's like, what did he do in between when he left and how did he become the leader of this pirate crew? Like, how did he come across them? What were the interactions like? And then what happened up until the point where he reunited with Buttercup?
All right.
I don't know if they could really do that at this point, but hey. Anyway, this next one is a three-way because they're all very prominent characters in the films, but not to the point where they overshadow the lead. At least I don't think so. And they are Legolas, Aragorn, and Gimli from the first three Lord of the Rings films that were made.
Yeah.
Because it's like we see definite highlights from them, entire scenes dedicated to them, but then there's whole entire scenes still dedicated to Frodo, Sam, Gandalf. And I would love to see a whole series where it covers what happens with them during the times where the films focus on Frodo, or maybe what do they do after the ring's destroyed, or maybe even younger versions of them training to become the warriors that we see in the movies.
You people might laugh at this, but I've never really sat through a Lord of the Rings movie. But from what my basic limited understanding can tell me, I mean, those movies were much more about Frodo's journey than it was about anybody else's. Pretty much everybody else was kind of like a supporting asset to his mission in a way. So uh, so maybe they do kind of deserve a little more time in the spotlight. Maybe me a little more of a glimpse for us at their side of it. Maybe.
Yeah, if anyone wants to watch the Lord of the Rings films, they are good, but they are notorious for being really long. Usually each one is at least 3 hours from what I remember. It's been a little while since I've seen any of them. I'll probably go back and watch them again when I have a lot of free time. But yeah, I definitely would like some more development on these particular guys.
Yeah, my brother talked my mom into watching the trilogy, and she would probably tell you the same thing. It's long, lengthy running time.
Uh, so the next one is another group of sorts. But I wrote down many of the Batman villains.
Oh yeah,
And I didn't think of one specifically because I know some of them kind of already had their stories told to a point. But I would love to see a series that shows how some of the most iconic of them, like the Joker, Poison Ivy, Mr. Freeze, etc., how some of them became who they are now. Some can take more than one episode if needed, but it's like, what were they like before they started descending into madness? What were they like before the incident that turned them into what they are now? That sort of thing.
one interesting creative thing I think they could do is probably put a bunch of these villains together, have them play off each other a bunch, like what they did with the second Superman film with Lex Luthor and the villains from Krypton.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
I also thought of like the original Batman movie with Adam West, where all the villains were together, or even Batman the Animated Series, because there's at least two episodes I can think of where multiples of them were interacting off each other. I think one of them was called Trial or something close to that, where pretty much all the villains in the series are in one room holding a court case of sorts, trying to decide if Batman is causing more harm than he is good. Because technically, with many of those villains, he kind of, in a sense, helped create them. Not necessarily intentionally, but some of his actions kind of led to some of the incidents that turned them into who they are. And then the other one I remember very vividly is called Almost Got Him, where I think it's the Joker, Poison Ivy, Two Face, Penguin, and Killer Croc all sitting around a poker table trying to decide who has come the closest to defeating Batman once and for all. It's like interactions like that could be made into a show in of itself.
Yeah, yeah, probably.
And then the last one I wrote, excuse me, was Hades. Now I know there's multiple film iterations of Hades out there, but the one I was thinking about was the one from Disney's Hercules. Because for many people, he's arguably the favorite character out of all of them. Some people might like Hercules a lot, some might like Phil, Meg, or somebody else. But I feel like the general consensus as to who their favorite character is Hades. For a lot of people, it's because he's just ridiculously funny. And for others, on top of that, it's also because he doesn't really talk or act like your traditional villain most of the time. He kind of talks like a negotiator sometimes, like a lawyer, maybe an agent, something like that. Um, but aside from the times where he gets really angry and his hair, quote unquote, turns a burning red, he doesn't really act like your traditional Disney villain. And I would love to see a spin-off series of sorts that focuses specifically on him.
I think maybe there has been like some sort of Hercules spin-off series where he probably got more time in the spotlight or something like that. But something where he gets the top billing, would probably be something worthy.
Well, now that you said that, I do remember that Hercules and other cartoons like Aladdin, for that matter, Hercules, I know, or at least I'm pretty sure, got some sort of television series at some point, but I never saw it. So I don't know if they delve more into Hades' character or not. But yeah, like you were saying, if they made one where Hades got the top billing, I would love to see it.
Yeah, I probably would go for it.
Sure. I mean, he's just fun to watch, so why not?
Yeah, so is that your whole list?
Yep, that was all of them.
Okay. All right. I've got 8 of my own here. And the first one I thought of was another character from The Incredibles, but a hero, actually, specifically Violet. Violet is probably out of out of all the Incredibles characters, aside from Mr. Incredible, possibly the most fleshed out, most humanized, and
Okay.
maybe doing some kind of a sequel film, kind of following her, or maybe doing her own sort of heroic gig might be interesting.
Now, would you want that to happen while she's still in her teenage phase or after she becomes an adult?
I was thinking maybe in adulthood.
Okay. Yeah, I could see
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. I'm thinking then I thought of, well, a much more classic Linus, the character from Peanuts. He has he has kind of gotten plenty of spotlight time in animated cartoons and the comic strip, but probably never as top billing as Charlie Brown. And he certainly has a likable enough personality and is probably interesting enough that he could be the star of something his own.
Oh, for sure. Because Linus, he does have some highlights of his own here and there. Like one that especially comes to mind is during a Charlie Brown Christmas, where he's on the stage and he just recites the story of the night Jesus was born. Like that is iconic to many people. And he has other moments here and there, but obviously because of who the main character is, it doesn't always focus on him for an extended period of time unless he's with Charlie Brown or Lucy, Snoopy. So yeah, I definitely love to see a spin-off of sorts that makes him the main focus.
Yeah, well, maybe follow his career life, maybe, or anything really he could do. He could pretty easily, I think, make something out of nothing.
Oh, for sure. For
Yeah,
sure. And the other characters could still show up, but
yeah,
I definitely think he could be the main focus.
yeah, yeah. and then I thought of, of a character from Rugrats, Angelica Pickles, who who's probably not the most likable animated character, but is nonetheless entertaining and can be kind of charming in that with the things that she does. I would kind of like maybe to see her more fleshed out as an adult. Uh, that would at least be interesting. I don't know if it would be redemptive, but at least interesting.
Well, I know they had this series a while back, or maybe it was just one movie. I'm not sure, but it was called Rugrats All Grown Up, and it did show them
Yeah.
a bit older, but I never saw it, so I don't know what she is like in that one. Uh, but yeah, it still would be cool to see. Don't get me wrong.
Probably the one difference in the All Grown Up series is that her English is less broken now that she's older. Other
Okay,
than that, she's still more or less a brat.
gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I thought of all right, going further back in time, the housekeeper Alice on the Brady Bunch. Um, while she is there primarily to serve as the family housekeeper, she also is very much like one of the family herself and provides some of the more humorous lines in the show and has such a friendly and kind of upbeat and positive vibe about her that is really captivating, and I think she would deserve a little something special of her own.
Okay, I haven't seen a ton of the Brady Bunch in a while, so I don't remember her too well, but I will definitely take your word for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Next one is one not quite as famous unless you're really into medical dramas or something. It's a more modern character, and it is the character of Dr. Charles from the NBC drama Chicago Med. And so, yeah, probably not one of the more fleshed out or probably doesn't get as near as much screen time as the doctors themselves. He's kind of like the psychiatric leader at the Chicago hospital, but is always seems to be kind of a voice of reason, always emotionally sound, and always providing comfort or something. He has a sort of caring vibe about him that I think would make him a worthy subject of maybe something in the future.
Okay, do the does the Chicago Med show take place in the same universe, as it were, as Chicago PD and Chicago Fire?
I would like to think so, since I did see one episode of one of them where characters from two of the shows interacted with each other to deal with some kind of emergency. So I'd like to think it's all one universe.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I feel like a spin-off where it focused on one or two characters from Chicago Med or any of the other ones could actually work. Yeah, I could see it.
Yeah, maybe a long shot, but at least worth considering.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then one other one for similar reasons, a more famous example. I said Professor Lupin, whom, if I'm correct, was first introduced into the Harry Potter universe in the Prisoner of Azkaban story when he served as the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor at Hogwarts. And most of the other professors, and even a lot of the characters in general, have some sort of very loud or eccentric vibe to them. But Lupin, by comparison, seems like, from my memory of reading from the book and seeing the movie, has a bit more of a relaxed, more easygoing, more quiet vibe to him that makes him sort of refreshing among the cast, and so kind of for that reason I put him down.
All right, I will just give a heads up that I know next to nothing about Harry Potter, particularly because I wasn't allowed to really read or watch it growing up, and I completely understood. Um, so aside from what you're telling me, there's not much else I know. But if you think he deserves a spinoff, all the
Yeah,
more power to you.
yeah. All right. Guess we'll leave it at that. And let's take. And then this is a character I don't really know about his comic book version as well as I know about his like cinematic version from the 1970s. Jimmy Olsen, who was the Daily Planet photographer in the Superman universe, and yeah, yeah, he's seems like a likable guy, upbeat vibe. Well, this young, a bright, smiling kid who's who's not that fleshed out, but is seems like an approachable, um, hardworking, reliable guy, and I think doesn't get the credit or acknowledgement that he deserves. I think maybe he should get a little more top billing.
Okay, I can definitely understand that. Maybe it could be like a show that focuses on his career at the Daily Planet. Um, and then every once in a while, you'll see Superman, and there could be episodes where he has the challenge of getting a good photograph of him when he's flying or fighting somebody. But yeah, I think a show like that could work, where it focuses on him.
Yeah, yeah. And here's one that's probably not quite as famous and only has like a very minor role in, and it's Mayor Wilson in Back to the Future. Well, he's kind of established like toward toward the first act and like the first 20 minutes of the movie. I mean, but then we don't really meet him until like after Marty travels back to 1955, and he back in that era is working as kind of a cleaning crew at this little diner in Hill Valley. And it's like, and if you know the plot, if you know the scene, Marty McFly kind of plants the seed like by accident in a way, like to convince him to pursue the seat of mayor of Hill Valley. And uh, maybe it'd be kind of nice to see a story chronicling maybe his journey from the bottom of society to the top being mayor, or something similar to that would probably be worth watching.
All right, yeah, I don't remember too much about him. I definitely have seen the films. Yeah, maybe if I go back and look at this character again, then I'll have a better understanding. But yeah, having a story focus on him, that would be cool. Maybe it could be a time traveling thing where it shows him older or younger, just to see where he's at any given point.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, all right. So that's going to pretty much do it at this point, and um, well, we do plan on being back soon. Enjoy our stuff on YouTube, Facebook, Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and tell us what your ideas for a subject for a spinoff show or movie like we talked about, or your thoughts on the Alec Baldwin case, or what you hope comes out of it, or whatever. And ever please reach out and talk to us. That'd be cool.
Yeah, really, any interactions we have with the audience is a fun experience. We just love talking to people and hearing their opinions, whether or not they're different from ours. Uh, and especially when it comes to current events, hearing other people's thoughts could also be very informative. So if there's pretty much anything you want to say to us, don't be shy. We don't bite. We will respond in a very friendly manner. And we honestly cannot wait to hear from you.
Yeah, please send any comments, any questions you have for us, and I'll take what. Either way, thank you all for streaming, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.
So long, everyone.